You think humanity can be controlled. That was your first mistake.
The first thing Calder Horn noticed was the silence, not the absence of sound. There was plenty of that. The deep mechanical hum of the station's core, the faint vibration under his boots, the distant rhythm of systems older than any human civilization. But inside the chamber, there was a deliberate quiet, the kind imposed, not requested. He stood at the center of a circular hall carved from obsidian alloy and silver-veined composite, its architecture unmistakably non-human. No banners, no windows, just segmented walls that curved upward like the inside of a colossal engine, illuminated by cold, directional light that seemed designed to expose rather than comfort. Calder had been in interrogation rooms before. Human ones, military ones, this was different. This room wasn't meant to break you, it was meant to measure you. She stood across from him, perfectly still. Supreme Commander Valera Kor didn't sit. She didn't lean, she didn't pace. Her posture was upright, balanced, as if gravity itself deferred to her authority. The dark navy uniform she wore was tailored with alien precision, sharp lines, reinforced shoulders, metallic insignia embedded directly into the fabric. Every element communicated control, rank, finality. Her species called themselves the Aurelian Conquered, a civilization older than recorded human history, efficient, disciplined, unemotional by reputation. Valera's eyes locked onto Calder's. They were not human eyes. Their color shifted subtly in the light, green at first glance, but deeper beneath it, layered, calculating. He'd read reports about Aurelian ocular processing, multiple focal depths, emotional microanalysis, predictive modeling embedded in biology itself. She was reading him. Calder did not look away. That, he knew, was mistake number one, or advantage number one. He hadn't decided which. You were instructed to keep your gaze lowered, Valera said. Her voice was calm, resonant, and precise. Not loud, not threatening. Worse than both, certain. Calder exhaled slowly. No one instructed me to do anything, Commander. They escorted me. A flicker, barely perceptible. Something passed behind her eyes. Interesting. Valera inclined her head a fraction, as if acknowledging a data point rather than a challenge. Human protocol often differs from human behavior, she replied. You are former military. Former, Calder confirmed. Emphasis on former. You were discharged dishonorably. Incorrect. His jaw tightened slightly. I resigned. That earned him a pause. Around them, unseen systems adjusted, light intensity shifting by a marginal degree, sensors recalibrating. Calder felt it like pressure in the air, subtle but unmistakable. The room was responding to her attention. Valera took one step forward, not aggressive, not cautious, deliberate. She closed the distance until only a few meters separated them, close enough that Calder could see the fine detailing along her collar, the angular emblem resting at the base of her throat, a symbol denoting absolute authority within the conquered, close enough to register the faint warmth radiating from her presence, biological but controlled. You were brought here, she said, because you survived an event no other human in your delegation did. But Calder's expression didn't change. Inside, something old and disciplined settled into place. Luck, he said. No, Valera replied immediately. Luck produces inconsistent outcomes. Your survival followed a statistically improbable sequence of decisions. She was not accusing him. She was dissecting him. You deviated from evacuation protocol, she continued. You ignored direct orders. You redirected power manually through a system your species was never meant to interface with. Calder met her gaze evenly. It worked. Yes, another pause, longer this time. It did. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Calder had the distinct impression that this was not an interrogation in the traditional sense. She wasn't trying to extract information. She was trying to understand why he wasn't afraid. Most humans were by now. Valera's voice lowered, not in volume but in tone. Do you know how many species have stood where you stand now? Calder shook his head once. I'm guessing you're going to tell me. 312, she said. Every one of them a representative of their world. Everyone convinced of their own significance. And Calder asked, her lips curved just slightly, not a smile. Something sharper. They all looked away. The words landed between them like a blade set gently on a table. Calder held her gaze. Then I suppose, he said calmly, they weren't the ones you were really interested in. For the first time since he'd entered the chamber, the systems around them hesitated. Velira Core did not move, but something had shifted, and Calder knew, without any doubt, that this meeting was no longer proceeding according to her design alone. Velira Core had interrogated warlords who smiled while bleeding out, and diplomats who begged without understanding they were begging. She had watched species collapse under the weight of a single sentence delivered in the wrong tone. Calder Horn did none of those things. He stood with the stillness of a man who had already lost something he could never name aloud. No trembling hands, no shallow breath, no instinctive retreat. His gaze stayed where it was, steady, unblinking, as if he'd decided long ago that fear was a luxury he could not afford. Velira did not enjoy anomalies. She studied them, cataloged them, neutralized them when necessary. Yet as she watched him, a strange, unwelcome sensation surfaced beneath her discipline, an internal friction between expectation and observation. The Concord's predictive models were flawless within their parameters. Human behavior, however, was an irritant to every system she'd ever trusted. Your defiance is performative, she said, not because she believed it, but because she needed to hear his response. Calder's mouth twitched at one corner. Is that what you call it when someone doesn't bow? It is what I call it when someone attempts to appear unafraid while their body betrays them. Calder lifted a brow. And is my body betraying me? Velira's eyes tracked him in layers, micro-tension at the jawline, pulse rhythm, ocular dilation, breath cadence. The chamber's sensors fed her a silent stream of confirmation. His heart rate was elevated, but not erratic. His respiration was controlled. His muscles carried readiness, not panic. He was afraid, but he was choosing not to obey it. That, she said after a measured pause, is what makes you dangerous. Calder's expression settled into something calmer, older. Dangerous to who? To stability, Velira replied. The word was a doctrine. The Conquered did not worship gods, they worshipped order. A civilization that had lasted millennia did so by eliminating chaos before it could become myth. Calder's eyes held hers. Stability is just a nicer word for control. The chamber's light adjusted again, fractional, involuntary. Velira felt the room react to her own internal shift, and the realization irritated her more than his remark. She took another step closer. Now he was within her personal radius, the distance at which most species instinctively recoiled from her presence. Calder did not. He held his ground, shoulders squared, hands relaxed at his sides. A man who knew violence but didn't need to broadcast it. You are not here, Velira said, to debate philosophy. Then why am I here? Calder asked. Velira allowed herself a beat of silence, not to intimidate him, to align her own intent. Because, she said, your delegation was part of a controlled exposure, a simulation designed to test interspecies compliance under stress. Calder's gaze sharpened, the first true change in him since he'd entered. A simulation, he repeated quietly. The event was not intended to be lethal, Velira continued. Your species reacted with unpredictability. Multiple human delegates violated the design protocol. One of them attempted to breach a sealed system and died. Another refused medical sedatives and attacked a conquered medic. Calder's jaw tightened. You did this to us. Velira's voice remained even. We did this for the galaxy. Your species expands rapidly. You adapt rapidly. You destabilize environments without meaning to. The Conquered was tasked with determining whether humanity could be integrated peacefully or must be contained. Calder stared at her for a long moment. Behind him, the sealed doors remained silent. There was no escape route, no leverage, no weapon, yet he looked at her like she was the one being evaluated. Contained, he said, tasting the word as if it were rust. That was the projected outcome, Valera admitted. Calder's voice lowered. And now, Valera felt the faintest pressure inside her chest, an instinct older than training, a signal that she was standing near something that could change a system. She disliked that sensation. It was disorder and it was real. Now, she said, I am uncertain. Calder's eyes did not soften. They hardened not with hatred but with clarity. If you were trying to see how we behave under pressure, he said, you got your answer. Yes, Valera replied. Calder took one slow step forward. Most beings would have interpreted that as defiance. Valera interpreted it as intent. His proximity increased the sensor load. The chamber registered him more aggressively. Valera could have signaled security with a thought. She did not. Calder stopped close enough that she could smell the faint metallic trace of antiseptic on his uniform collar, mixed with something human, heat, skin, the subtle aftershock of adrenaline. His eyes held hers without apology. You want to know why I didn't follow your protocol? He asked. Valera's gaze narrowed. Explain. Because I recognized it, Calder said. Valera's expression didn't change, but her focus sharpened. Recognized what? She demanded. Calder's voice remained calm. A trap designed by people who think they're smarter than everyone else. A situation where the rules exist to make you fail, not survive. Valera felt a precise, cold anger spark in her. Not because he was wrong, because he was. The conquered does not create traps, she said. Calder's lips curved faintly. Call it whatever you want. I've been in rooms like this before. Valera paused. Human interrogation facilities, she said almost dismissively. Calder's gaze darkened. Not as the interrogator. Silence fell again, deeper this time. Valera watched him, and for a moment the chamber seemed to fade behind her awareness. She heard only his breathing, the steady beat of his heart, the quiet weight of a confession that was not asking for sympathy. It was simply true. Who held you? Valera asked, and the question escaped before she could decide if she wanted to know the answer. Calder blinked once. Then slowly he exhaled. My own side, he said. That answer struck harder than any accusation. Valera's mind ran projections instantly. Internal human conflict, institutional punishment, betrayal-based conditioning. Her models adjusted. Humanity had not only survived chaos, they had been forged by it. And Calder Horn was not a representative of peaceful compliance. He was a survivor of controlled cruelty. Valera took a step back, small, nearly imperceptible. Calder noticed. Now you're the one retreating, he said softly. Valera's eyes flashed. Do not mistake recalibration for retreat. Calder held her gaze. I don't. Another pause. Another recalibration. Valera turned slightly, angling her body to the chamber's central console. With a subtle gesture, she dismissed a layer of the room's monitoring. The lights warmed by a fraction, less clinical, less predatory. Calder's eyes flicked to the change. He noticed everything. Of course he did. This chamber, Valera said, voice controlled, was built to confirm what we already believed. Calder waited. Valera's throat tightened with something she had not named in years. Discomfort. Not fear. Not doubt. Responsibility. I brought you here alone, she continued, because your file suggested you were the only human in the delegation capable of resisting scripted outcomes. Calder's expression stayed neutral. And what happens if I resist yours? Valera met his gaze fully. Then, she said, the conquered will have to accept something we have avoided for centuries. Calder's voice was low. What's that? Valera's lips parted slightly. Her next words came out like a verdict. That control is not the same as peace. The chamber's door mechanisms clicked, barely audible but unmistakable. Calder's head turned a fraction, listening. Valera did not look away from him. I have requested an unscheduled audience with the High Axis Council, she said. They will object. They will attempt to override me. They may attempt to remove you. Calder's gaze returned to her. And you. Valera held his eyes, the weight of her rank settling into her posture like armor. I will not allow it, she said. Calder studied her for a long moment, as if deciding whether that promise was real. Then he asked quietly, almost casually, why? Valera did not answer immediately, because the honest reason was not strategic. The honest reason was that when Calder refused to look away, it had not felt like defiance. It had felt like recognition, and that was far more dangerous than any weapon. I do not yet know, Valera said at last, but I intend to find out. The doors behind Calder released with a soft hiss. Freedom, or an illusion of it. Valera's gaze remained fixed on him as the corridor lights beyond the chamber flared to life, revealing a path that had not existed moments ago. Calder didn't move right away. He looked at her one final time. If your council tries to contain us, he said, you'll learn something about humans your models can't predict. Valera's eyes narrowed. Which is? Calder's mouth tightened into a faint, grim line. We don't stay contained. Then he turned and walked into the corridor, steady, unhurried like a man who had already survived cages. Valera watched him go, pulse steady, expression controlled. But inside her, the predictive engines of an empire began to misfire, and for the first time in her life, uncertainty didn't feel like weakness. It felt like the beginning of something she couldn't stop. Behind her, a warning icon flickered across the chamber console, an encrypted incoming message from the High Axis Council. Mandate review initiated. Command authority challenged. Valera stared at the message without blinking. Then she whispered, so quietly no censor would record it, let them try. And somewhere in the corridor, Calder Horn smiled without joy, because he understood exactly what it meant when a ruler decided to protect you. It meant she had chosen a side, and sides always demanded payment. Valera Core had never disobeyed a mandate. She had reinterpreted them, redirected them, delayed them until opposition collapsed under its own inefficiency. But outright defiance, placing her authority in direct opposition to the High Axis Council, was something she had only ever studied as a historical failure. Yet as the Council's encrypted presence materialized above the command dais, Valera felt no hesitation, only clarity. The chamber around her shifted configuration, metallic panels folding outward to form a semicircular tribunal interface. 7 luminous sigils ignited in the air, each representing a high-axis delegate. Their projections were abstract by design, no faces, no bodies, only symbols of function and power. Individuality was considered a weakness at that level. Supreme Commander Core, the central sigil intoned, its voice harmonized by layered synthesis. You have exceeded your operational scope. Valera stood alone beneath them, hands clasped behind her back, posture immaculate. I have exercised it. A brief data ripple passed through the sigils. Displeasure translated into code. You were authorized to assess human compliance, another voice said, not to compromise conquered neutrality. Valera's eyes remained forward. Neutrality is irrelevant if the assessment framework is flawed. Your framework has served the conquered for 6,000 cycles. And will fail us now, Valera replied without inflection. Silence followed, not because they were surprised, but because they were recalculating. The human Calder Horn, the central sigil resumed, has triggered an anomaly cascade across your decision tree. You have disabled containment protocols. You have granted him unmonitored movement within a restricted sector. I have, Valera confirmed. Explain. Valera inhaled slowly. She did not reference emotion. She referenced outcome. He does not behave like a subject under evaluation, she said. He behaves like a variable capable of altering the system observing him. That is a poetic interpretation, a sigil replied coldly. It is a precise one. Valera's gaze sharpened. Our models assume that sentient species seek safety through submission. Humanity does not. They seek agency, even at the cost of survival. That makes them unstable. That makes them incompatible with containment, Valera countered, and exceptionally dangerous if cornered. Another pause, longer this time. You are advocating integration, the central sigil said, prematurely. I am advocating revision, Valera said, before escalation becomes inevitable. A new symbol flared, override authority. Supreme Commander Corps, the Council declared, your proximity to the subject has compromised your objectivity. Valera felt the weight of that accusation, not personally but strategically. This was the opening move. Discredit the node, isolate the variable. I request permission to present evidence, she said. Denied. The word hit like a blade. Valera's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Then I invoked discretionary command privilege. The sigils pulsed sharply. Alarm thresholds rose across the chamber. You would challenge the council, one demanded. Valera lifted her chin. I would prevent the conquered from making a catastrophic error. The tribunal lights dimmed. For a moment, Valera stood alone with the consequences of her choice. Then the central sigil spoke again, its tone altered, harder, stripped of pretense. Calder Horn is to be detained immediately. His species, evaluation will proceed without his influence. Valera did not respond. Supreme Commander. Still nothing, Valera Corps. Her voice when it came was quiet. No. But the word echoed more loudly than any declaration. You will comply, the council warned. Valera's eyes burned with cold resolve. I will not. The tribunal interface collapsed abruptly, severed by her command override. The chamber fell silent once more, but this time it was different. Heavier. Charged. Valera exhaled and turned away, already issuing silent directives through neural command channels. Lock external security out of Sector Theta. Scramble internal tracking. Reassign Calder Horn's designation. A pause. Then she hesitated just long enough to consider the implications, and made the final adjustment. Change status. Subject right arrow liaison. Calder Horn felt the shift before he understood it. The corridor lights adjusted to his presence, not aggressively scanning him, but guiding him. Doors that should have required clearance slid open a fraction early. The hum of surveillance systems softened as if the station itself had relaxed its grip. He stopped walking. Something had changed. Calder turned slowly, eyes narrowing as he studied the corridor behind him. No guards, no drones. No alarms, freedom, but deliberate. He'd seen this kind of freedom before. The kind that came with strings you couldn't see until they tightened. A soft chime sounded at his side. A holographic interface blossomed into view, bearing a single symbol, Valera S. Her voice followed, low and controlled. Mr. Horn, do not alter your course. Calder snorted quietly. Good to hear from you, too. You are being reassigned. Lucky me. A pause, then. This decision carries consequences. Calder leaned against the corridor wall, folding his arms. So did the last few you made. Another pause, shorter this time. The council has issued a detainment order, Valera said. Calder's expression didn't change. Let me guess, you said no. Yes. That earned her a sharp look, respect unspoken but genuine. And what does that cost you? He asked. Valera did not answer immediately. Everything, she said finally. Calder closed his eyes for a brief moment, not in relief, in recognition. You didn't have to do that, he said. I did, Valera replied. Because the alternative was worse. Calder opened his eyes. You're betting your empire on a human you barely know. No, Valera corrected. I am betting it against certainty. That gave him a humorless smile. Certainty, S overrated. A faint shift in her tone, something almost human. Proceed to the observation deck, Valera said. You will remain under my authority. And if your council overrides you. Valera's answer was immediate. Then, she said, this station becomes the first fracture in a system that believes it cannot break. Calder pushed off the wall and started walking again, footsteps steady. You know, he said, where I'm from that is called starting a war. Valera watched his vitals through the feed, steady, resolved. No, she replied quietly. It is called acknowledging one. The channel closed. Calder continued down the corridor, aware now that he was no longer just a survivor or a test subject. He was leverage, and Valera Core had just declared herself willing to use it. Somewhere deep within the station, dormant protocols began to awaken, contingencies designed for threats that came not from outside the conquered, but from within. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy edged closer to a conflict not driven by conquest, but by choice. Calder Horn had learned long ago that observation decks were never about the view. They were about control. The chamber opened into a vast arc of reinforced crystal and layered energy shielding, revealing a slow panorama of deep space beyond the station. Distant stars burned cold and indifferent. Their light filtered through conquered engineering that bent reality just enough to remind visitors where they stood in the hierarchy. Calder stood near the barrier, hands resting loosely at his sides, posture relaxed but alert. The galaxy spread before him like a map he hadn't agreed to be part of. Behind him, the doors sealed with a muted thrum. He didn't turn around. Your vitals stabilized once you entered this sector, Valera's voice said, transmitted through the chamber without any visible source. Most humans experience elevated stress responses here. Calder's lips curved faintly. Guess I'm not most humans. No, Valera replied. You are not. Her presence resolved a moment later. No dramatic entrance, no announcement. She simply stepped into the light as if she had always been there, uniform, immaculate, expression composed. But Calder noticed what the systems could not fully mask. Her shoulders were tighter. Not fear. Tension. You're exposed here, Calder said, still facing the stars. No guards, no council projections. This deck is shielded from external oversight, Valera replied. It was designed for reflection. Calder finally turned to look at her. Didn't take you for the reflective type. I was not, she said, until recently. They regarded each other in silence, the weight of unspoken consequences settling between them. Calder studied her now with a different lens, not as an interrogator, not even as a commander, but as someone who had stepped outside the safety of certainty. You reassigned me as a liaison, he said. That wasn't a small move. It was a necessary one. For who, Calder asked, me or you? Valera met his gaze without flinching. For the conquered. Calder gave a low chuckle. You keep telling yourself that. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in concentration. You believe this decision was emotional. I believe, Calder said carefully, that you made it knowing exactly how badly it could go. That is not the same thing. No, he agreed, it's worse. Valera stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. Close enough that Calder could see the faint, almost imperceptible changes in her expression, the micro-adjustments she could not entirely suppress. You misunderstand the nature of authority within the conquered, she said. We are not ruled by impulse. Neither am I, Calder replied. But I've seen what happens when people pretend they are. Valera's jaw tightened. Explain. Calder took a breath, steady and measured. Back home, we built systems to eliminate uncertainty. Committees, protocols, simulations. And every time something went wrong, the people at the top said the same thing. And what was that? Valera asked. That the model was sound, Calder said, and the humans inside it were the problem. Valera was silent. Calder continued, voice calm but edged with something harder. You're standing at that same point right now. Your council thinks the system is perfect, that if humanity doesn't fit, it's humanity's fault. That assumption has preserved galactic stability for millennia, Valera said. Calder nodded slowly. So did ours, until it didn't. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Valera turned her gaze back toward the stars. For a moment, Calder thought she might dismiss him, retreat into doctrine. Instead, she spoke quietly. When I authorized your reassignment, she said, I violated 3 core tenets of conquered command. Calder raised an eyebrow. Only 3. Her lips twitched almost despite herself. 1. A commander does not alter classification mid-evaluation. 2. A subject does not gain influence without consensus. 3. Emotional variables are removed from strategic consideration. Calder studied her. And which one bothers you the most? Valera did not answer immediately. The third, she said finally. Calder nodded. Figures. She turned back to him, eyes sharp. You assume too much. I assume just enough, Calder replied. Enough to know that you didn't protect me because I was useful. Valera's expression hardened. You are useful. But that's not why, he said gently. The word gently unsettled her more than accusation would have. You saw something in me, Calder continued. Something your models couldn't account for, and instead of eliminating it, you stepped in front of it. Valera felt a flare of irritation. You speak as if you understand me. But I understand the moment, Calder said. The one where you realize that following orders won't save you from what comes next. Silence fell again, but this time it was not imposed. It was shared. Valera straightened, her composure reasserting itself like armor sliding back into place. Your role as liaison will require cooperation, she said. You will attend council briefings. You will advise on human behavioral unpredictability. And if I advise against them, Calder asked. Valera met his gaze. Then I will listen. That surprised him, and if they do, Valera's eyes darkened. Then they will learn the cost of ignoring reality. Calder exhaled slowly. You're serious. I am committed, Valera replied. There is a difference. Calder considered her for a long moment. Where I'm from, he said, people who talk like that usually end up alone. Valera's voice was steady. I am already there. The admission was quiet, honest. Calder stepped closer, not invading her space but bridging it. You don't have to be. Valera's eyes searched his face, reading layers of intent, memory, restraint. She found no manipulation there, no hunger for power, only resolve. That, she said softly, is precisely why this is dangerous. Before Calder could respond, the observation deck systems flared, lights shifting, alarms muted but unmistakable. Valera's attention snapped to the internal feed, multiple signals, council-level encryption, emergency override protocols activating. They're moving faster than I anticipated, she said. Calder's jaw tightened. Override. They are attempting to reassert command jurisdiction over this station. And you. Valera's fingers flexed once at her side. I am attempting to stay ahead of them. Calder looked past her out at the stars. You won't, not forever. Valera turned to him sharply. Then what do you suggest? Calder met her gaze, calm but unyielding. You stop playing defense. The alarms grew louder, closer to audible now. Valera stared at him. You are suggesting escalation. I'm suggesting honesty, Calder said. With your people. With mine, with yourself. Valera felt the weight of centuries press down on her training, her instincts, her loyalty to a system that had shaped her entire existence. And beneath it all, a simpler truth emerged. Control was slipping, and she could either clamp down harder or change how she held it. Prepare yourself, Valera said quietly. The council will not ask again. Calder's eyes hardened, not with fear but with readiness. Neither will humanity. They stood together as the station's internal systems shifted toward a state they had not entered in generations. Not war, not peace, but something far more unstable, a choice, and once made it would not be undone. The first thing Valera did was shut down the station's ceremonial systems. Lighting stripped to functional bands. Decorative fields collapsed. The observation deck lost its curated serenity and became what it truly was, a fortified command node disguised as contemplation. Calder felt the shift immediately. This is you choosing, he said quietly. Valera did not deny it. Command Protocol Theta-7, she said, voice precise, carried through the deck and into the station's neural lattice. Suspend non-essential processes. Elevate internal authority to supreme commander priority. A pause, then resistance. Authority conflict detected. The message flared across her peripheral vision like a wound. The council was no longer posturing. "They're trying to box you in," Calder said, eyes tracking the subtle vibration in the deck plating. "Force you to comply by procedure." "Yes," Valera replied. "They believe procedure will save them." She turned to face him fully now. No distance, no pretense. "You were correct," she said. "Defense is no longer sufficient." Calder studied her face, still composed, still controlled. But something fundamental had shifted beneath it. This was no longer a commander protecting a variable. This was a woman preparing to break doctrine. "What's your move?" he asked. Valera raised a hand, fingers splayed slightly. The air around them shimmered as a hollow interface unfolded. Raw data, no council filters. Population projections, expansion vectors, conflict probabilities. Humanity sat at the center of it all like a gravitational anomaly. "They believe containment will preserve balance," Valera said. "They are wrong. Containment will provoke escalation." Calder leaned closer, eyes scanning the data. "So you show them this. They will dismiss it." "Then you don't show them," Calder said. "You force them to see it." Valera's gaze sharpened. "Explain." Calder pointed to a branching projection. "This path, limited integration, shared command exercises, controlled exposure without subjugation." Valera hesitated. "That path requires trust." "No," Calder said. "It requires leverage." She looked at him slowly. "You," he continued, "are betting your authority on the idea that humans won't kneel quietly. So don't pretend otherwise. Use it." Valera felt something cold and precise settle into place. Not fear, not excitement, alignment. "You would position your species as a counterweight," she said. Calder met her gaze. "You already are." The station shuddered harder this time, not structural damage, a signal. Valera's internal feed flared red. Council override in progress. Command lockout T-minus 300 seconds, 5 minutes. "They're moving to strip you," Calder said. "Yes. And if they succeed." Valera's jaw set. "Then I become an example." Calder exhaled slowly. "You know what happens to people who become examples." "I do," Valera said. "They are remembered." She turned sharply, issuing commands faster now. "Divert council uplink traffic. Isolate axis oversight channels. Initiate contingency broadcast." The system hesitated, then complied. Calder watched her, impressed despite himself. "You've been sitting on this." "I was trained for crisis," Valera replied. "I simply never expected it to come from within." A new holofield ignited, this one showing a live feed of the high-axis chamber. 7 sigils flared brighter, agitated now. "Supreme Commander Corps," the central sigil demanded, "cease this action immediately." Valera stepped forward, posture flawless. "No," she said calmly. "You will listen. You have exceeded." "I have preserved the conquered," Valera interrupted. "You are endangering it." The sigils pulsed violently. "You are compromised," another accused. Valera did not flinch. "I am informed." She gestured and Calder's profile appeared beside her in the projection. Not restrained, not labeled, standing. "This is Calder Horn," Valera said. "A human you intended to reduce to data. He is not unique. He is representative." Calder felt the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes lock onto him. He didn't bow, didn't posture, he simply stood. "You fear humanity because you cannot predict it," Valera continued. "You cannot predict it because you refuse to understand it. Containment will not bring compliance. It will bring resistance. And what would you propose?" The central sigil demanded. Valera's voice hardened. "Integration without submission, partnership without illusion. And if you cannot accept that..." She paused. "Then you are no longer fit to decide the future of this galaxy." Silence crashed down like a vacuum breach. Calder glanced at her. "You just declared philosophical war." Valera's eyes stayed on the projection. "I declared reality." The override timer continued its silent countdown. "You're out of time," Calder said softly. Valera knew it. She turned to him, and for the first time since they'd met, something personal surfaced in her gaze, an unspoken question. "If this ends with my removal," she said, "they will come for you." Calder shrugged lightly. "They already were." "No," Valera said. "This time it will be permanent." Calder held her gaze. "Then don't let it be." The timer hit 0. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the station's core responded, not to the Council, but to Valera. Override failed. Command authority maintained. The sigils flickered wildly. "What did you do?" Calder asked. Valera exhaled once, controlled, steady. "I reminded the station who built it." The high-axis projections destabilized, their voices fracturing into overlapping commands. "You have crossed a line, Valera Core," the central sigil snarled. Valera stepped closer to the projection, eyes cold. "Yes," she said, "and now you must decide whether to follow me or chase a future that will burn you alive." The projection cut. The deck fell silent once more. Calder let out a slow breath. "That was either brilliant," he said, "or catastrophic." Valera turned to him. "They are often the same." She straightened, authority settling fully into her frame. "This station is now a fault line," she said. "What happens next will define more than policy." Calder nodded. "It'll define sides." Valera met his gaze, unwavering. "Then," she said, "we had better choose ours carefully." Far beyond the station, conquered fleets adjusted their trajectories, subtly, quietly, not toward an enemy, toward uncertainty. And for the first time in generations, the galaxy held its breath. The station did not erupt into chaos. That, Calder knew, was the most dangerous part. Corridors remained calm. Systems ran within optimal thresholds. No alarm screamed, no bulkhead slammed shut. To an outside observer, the Conquered's crown jewel continued its measured orbit, serene and obedient. Inside, however, loyalties were recalculating. Valera stood at the central command node, hands resting lightly on the console's edge. Around her, senior officers of the Aurelian Conquered appeared as layered holograms, captains, strategists, intelligence overseers. Their expressions were composed, but the silence between them was charged. They were waiting to see if she would flinch. Calder remained just off to the side, not as a subordinate, not as a prisoner, as an observer with intent. He could feel eyes on him, evaluating, weighing, categorizing. Humans made people nervous when they didn't fit the expected slot. "Supreme Commander," one of the captains began, "the High Axis Council has issued a fleet-wide advisory. They are questioning your legitimacy." Valera did not look at him. They would. "Several task groups have paused movement pending clarification." "Then they are cautious," Valera replied. "That is acceptable." Another officer spoke, voice tighter. "Others are not." A tactical projection bloomed, 3 conquered fleets adjusting course, not toward the station, but not away either, holding positions that could become something else very quickly. "They are choosing to wait," Calder murmured, "seeing who blinks first." Valera inclined her head, an old tactic. "And you?" Calder asked. "I do not blink." She turned then, gaze sweeping across her assembled command staff. "This is no longer a theoretical disagreement," she said. "The Council has initiated an internal schism. That alone threatens stability." A murmur rippled through the officers. Not fear, calculation. "You will hear arguments," Valera continued. "You will hear warnings about precedent and fracture. You will be told that unity requires obedience." Her eyes hardened. "Unity without truth is not stability, it is stagnation." Silence fell, absolute now. Calder studied the officers' faces. Some were uneasy, others intrigued. One of the intelligence overseers stepped forward, her tone careful. "Supreme Commander, if we align with you, we are effectively defying the highest authority of the Conquered." Valera met her gaze. "You are choosing whether the Conquered remains adaptive or becomes brittle." The overseer hesitated, and the human. All eyes shifted to Calder. He did not straighten, did not perform, he simply spoke. "I'm not here to lead your people," Calder said calmly. I'm here to make sure you don't misunderstand mine. A few brows furrowed, a few relaxed. Humanity doesn't want your throne, he continued. We want space to decide who we are without someone else deciding first. Valera watched the effect ripple outward, not persuasion, clarity. You fear that integrating humans invites chaos, Calder said. You're not wrong. But chaos doesn't disappear because you lock the door. It waits, and it gets smarter. The intelligence overseer regarded him for a long moment. And you believe your species will accept partnership. Calder shrugged lightly. We'll argue about it loudly. Some will resist, some will screw it up. He met her gaze. But we won't stop trying, that's kind of our thing. Valera felt something shift, not in the room but across the command lattice. Alignment probabilities adjusted. Resistance softened. Supreme Commander, another officer said slowly, if the Council moves to enforce compliance, they may authorize force. Valera nodded once, I am aware. And if they do? Valera straightened, every line of her posture radiating command. Then they will reveal themselves as what they truly are. Calder glanced at her. You're gambling they won't pull the trigger. No, Valera said. I am gambling that they will hesitate. She turned back to the tactical projection, issuing commands. Broadcast a station-wide address, she said. Open channel, no encryption. A risky move. The officers exchanged glances, then complied. Valera faced the invisible audience. Thousands of Concord personnel, watching from across the station, waiting for guidance they had never needed before. Members of the Concord, Valera began, voice steady, amplified across every corridor and deck. You have been told that order requires obedience. She paused. That belief built our civilization, it also blinded it. Calder felt the weight of the moment settle, like gravity. We now face a species that cannot be contained without conflict, Valera continued. Not because they are hostile, but because they are autonomous. To deny that is to invite war under the illusion of peace. She gestured, and Calder's image appeared briefly beside her, not elevated, not framed as a threat. Simply present. This human stands here not as a conqueror, Valera said, but as a reminder. Adaptation is not surrender. Murmurs echoed through the station's feeds. Doubt, agreement, fear. All officers and personnel are hereby ordered to maintain current positions, Valera concluded. No action will be taken against humanity without full transparency and consent. She straightened. This is not rebellion, it is evolution. The channel closed. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then confirmations began to roll in. Unit acknowledgments, compliance markers, not unanimous, but sufficient. Calder let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. You just split your empire on live feed. Valera's eyes stayed on the data. I gave it a choice. And if the Council doesn't like the outcome? Valera finally turned to him. Then they will have to face the reality they have avoided, she said. That power enforced without understanding creates resistance powerful enough to end civilizations. Calder nodded slowly. You sound like someone who studied human history. Valera's lips curved faintly. I am studying it now. An alert chimed, different this time. Not hostile. A single message from an independent fleet commander. We stand with adaptation. Then another and another. The fracture was no longer hypothetical. Calder met Valera's gaze. This doesn't end cleanly. No, she agreed. It ends honestly. The station held its course, balanced on the edge of transformation. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of command channels, the High Axis Council was learning a lesson they had never planned to study. Control, once questioned, could never be absolute again. The galaxy had not chosen peace, but it had chosen to wake up. The first shot was never fired. That, Calder realized, was the Council's final mistake. They believed hesitation was weakness. They believed restraint meant uncertainty. And they believed Valera Corps would retreat once pressure became visible enough to justify obedience. Instead, she advanced. The strategic chamber had changed again, less ceremonial, more alive. Tactical overlays floated in layered depth. Fleets represented not as symbols but as probabilities, shifting in real time as allegiance recalculated across the conquered. No single line divided loyalty anymore. It was a gradient, dangerous, honest. Valera stood at the center of it all, eyes fixed on a projection of the conquered's outer command ring. They are consolidating influence rather than force, Calder observed, trying to isolate you politically. Yes, Valera said. They are attempting to turn hesitation into consensus. That's how coups work back home, Calder replied. No blood, just silence. Valera inclined her head slightly. Efficient and insufficient. She gestured and a new data stream opened, human transmissions. Fragmented, chaotic, passionate. Calder watched them scroll past. Civilian feeds. Military councils, corporate blocks. Scientists arguing in overlapping threads. No single voice. No unified doctrine. Humanity unfiltered. You opened the channel, Calder said quietly. I wanted to see what I was aligning with, Valera replied. And she studied the data for a long moment. You are inefficient, emotion-driven, excessively contradictory. Calder smiled faintly. That's the sales pitch. And yet, Valera continued, you are impossible to fully dominate without destroying what makes you valuable. Calder's smile faded. A lot of people have learned that lesson the hard way. Valera turned to him then, gaze sharp. The council will move next through influence operations. Discredit you. Reframe you as a destabilizing agent. Calder nodded, already expected that. You will be portrayed as an anomaly, a rogue. An exception that proves containment is necessary. And you, Calder asked, Valera's jaw tightened, as compromised. Are you? The question landed softly, but it cut deep. Valera did not answer immediately. I was taught, she said slowly, that objectivity required distance. That authority required emotional removal. She met his eyes. But distance breeds ignorance, and ignorance masquerades as certainty. Calder held her gaze. That's not compromise. It is evolution, she agreed. An alert chimed priority channel, encrypted beyond standard council access. Valera's expression sharpened. They have activated the shadow mandate. Calder frowned. Sounds ominous. It is, Valera said. An internal doctrine reserved for existential threats. It allows autonomous action without council oversight. Calder's posture shifted, subtle, instinctive. You're saying someone's about to act without asking permission. Yes, and you don't know who. No, Valera admitted, but I know the target. She looked at him. Calder exhaled once. Figures. They will attempt to remove you, Valera said. Quietly, permanently. Your death will be framed as an unfortunate failure of integration. Calder didn't joke this time. Can you stop it? Valera's fingers flexed once, not without exposing the mandate itself, and doing so would fracture the conquered irreversibly. Calder studied her. So what's the play? Valera straightened, decision crystallizing. I remove the variable. Calder's eyes narrowed. Meaning, she said, you cannot remain here. Silence stretched between them, thick with consequence. You send me back, Calder said. They'll call it proof you were wrong. Yes, and if I stay, he continued, they kill me. Yes, Calder let out a slow breath. Those are bad options. Valera stepped closer than command protocol allowed. There is a third. Calder searched her face. I'm listening. I make you visible, Valera said. Public, untouchable without consequence. I bind your fate to mine. Calder stared at her. That's not protection, that's escalation. Yes, and if they move anyway. Valera's voice dropped. Then they declare themselves enemies of adaptation, and the conquered fractures openly. Calder shook his head slowly. You're risking everything. Valera's gaze did not waver. So are you. A warning flashed. Internal security breach detected. Not here. Not yet. Time was compressing. Calder considered the galaxy beyond the station. Humanity loud, divided, stubborn. The conquered ancient, controlled, afraid of what it could not script. and Valera standing between them, choosing uncertainty over illusion. "Do it," Calder said. Valera searched his eyes. "You understand what this makes you?" Calder nodded, a problem no one can ignore. Her lips curved faintly, not a smile, recognition. "Prepare a joint address," Valera ordered. "Full spectrum, no filters." Calder blinked. "You're putting me on stage." "I am removing your shadow," she replied. "They cannot erase what the galaxy is already watching." The command staff hesitated only a moment, then moved. As the broadcast systems powered up, Calder felt the weight of it settle in his chest. Not fear, responsibility. He looked at Valera. "Once this goes out, there's no going back." Valera met his gaze, eyes steady, unyielding. "There never was." Across the station, across the conquered, across worlds that had never spoken to one another directly, channels opened. The galaxy leaned in, and somewhere in the dark, the Shadow Mandate's agents adjusted their plans, because killing a man was easy. Silencing an idea was not. Chapter 7 ended not with a battle, but with a countdown. The galaxy did not erupt. It listened. The joint broadcast unfolded across layers of space no single authority had ever fully controlled. Civilian networks, military relays, scientific consortiums, fringe channels that thrived precisely because they were ignored. No banners, no anthems, just two figures standing side by side. Valera Kor, Supreme Commander of the Aurelian Conquered, and Calder Horn, human liaison by choice, not decree. Valera spoke first, not as a ruler but as a witness. "For centuries," she said, "the Conquered has equated stability with control. That belief preserved us. It also limited us." Her gaze did not leave the lens. "Humanity does not fit within our existing models, not because they are inferior, but because they are different in a way we did not anticipate." Calder stepped forward when she finished. He did not posture, he did not perform. "We didn't come here to replace anyone," he said. "We didn't come to kneel. We came because the galaxy got smaller and hiding stopped working." Human feeds spiked. Conquered channels flared. Arguments ignited in real time. Valera continued. "Containment will lead to conflict. Integration will lead to friction, but friction is survivable. Suppression is not." She paused. "This is not a treaty. It is an invitation." The broadcast ended without flourish. No applause, no verdict, just a silence heavy enough to change trajectories. The Shadow Mandate did not strike. Not immediately. Their operatives watched the aftermath unfold. Allegiances shifting, neutral fleets pausing, independent systems voicing support not for humanity, but for choice. To act now would expose the mandate. To wait risked losing relevance. Indecision crept where certainty once ruled. Valera felt it in the data streams. Calder felt it in the absence of violence. They stood alone now in a quieter chamber. The storm held at bay but far from over. "You made them hesitate," Calder said. Valera nodded. "Hesitation is the first crack." "And the next?" he asked. Valera turned toward the stars, eyes reflecting distant fires that had not yet ignited. "The next," she said, "is backlash." Calder smiled faintly. "Figures." A new message arrived unencrypted. No council seal. No fleet designation. Request for dialogue. Independent SYSTEMS coalition. Valera studied it carefully. "They are moving before the Conquered decides," she said. Calder exhaled slowly. "That's how things start." She looked at him then, not as a commander evaluating an asset, but as someone acknowledging a shared burden. "You are no longer safe," Valera said. Calder shrugged lightly. "Was I ever?" "No," she admitted, "but now your presence matters." Calder met her gaze. "So does yours." They stood in silence as the station adjusted course, not dramatically, just enough to register as intent. A subtle vector change logged across systems that would notice only later. Valera felt it in her bones, a future no model had predicted. The Conquered had not fractured. Humanity had not been accepted, but something irreversible had begun. Behind sealed layers of protocol, the Shadow Mandate updated its threat calculus. no longer targeting a man, but a convergence. Valera turned back to Calder. "This ends many ways," she said quietly. Calder nodded. "But not tonight." She inclined her head once, a gesture of respect unrecorded by any system. Outside, the stars held their positions. Inside, the galaxy took its first uncertain breath toward something new. And somewhere beyond the edge of known authority, forces began to gather, not for war, but for a decision still waiting to be made. The future had not chosen a side yet, but it had opened its eyes.
Ça s'appelle vendre la casquette.
Oui, c'est ça.
Ouais.
Et ça m'a fait fuir en plus. Non, mais c'était
Oui,
gentil.
je
C'était
sais.
super gentil, mais là, j'étais comme ah!
Je comprends.
Mais de toute façon, pourquoi achète-la? Yo, c'est parce que 45$,
c'est ça.
c'est cher, là. Là,
Sinon, il y a
45$,
le Lids.
c'est money.
Mais il y a
C'est
le
encore
Lids,
plus cher.
ouais.
Mais pour vrai,
Parce que ça, c'est touristique.
ouais, c'est ça.
Fait que-
Mais
mais en
elle
même
était
temps-
tellement belle, la casquette. Ah, mais les blancs. Lexa Arise, les Mossy Ballet. Merci pour les follow, Aridou, yo. Français des Nordiques à la place. Ouais, 45$.
Ouais, 45$, c'est beaucoup.
45$, tu sais, je m'aurais dit, mettons 25, je l'aurais
Ouais.
pris, mais le
Puis
45$,
45 parce
c'est un
qu'on n'est
budget.
même pas sûr d'aller au Centre Bell ce soir.
Ouais, c'est ça. Fait que. Voilà, les gars. Je t'ai send 25. Yo, The Girl W pour ton 25. W pour 25. OK, on va voir. On va voir si je reviens, guys. Parce que dans tous les cas, tu sais, il faut prévoir. Est-ce que. Aïe, aïe,
Aïe.
faut voir, est-ce qu'on se rend. Est-ce qu'on va réussir le goal, le sub-goal? Sinon, voilà. Yo, Drouin, c'est avec le tiers 1. Yo, mon Drouin. My guy, yo. What's up? Merci pour ton fucking sub. Je sais pas on est à combien de subs, mais voilà, les gars. Yo, ma soeur, mon Drouin. Tu veux qu'on je reprenne mon.
C'est comme tu veux.
Mais là, je vais pas te faire caméramaner de même, là. Viens ici.
OK.
Je vais la prendre dans le corner. Ça fait un spécial.
C'est un fou, là.
W, les gars, on est à combien, esti? Ah, excusez, on
Désolée.
faisait un échange de
les odds?
sacs. Merci, Artichaut, ton follow. Va manger kebab. On verra, guys, on verra. Parce que, pour vrai, c'est ça, le goal, c'est d'ici 18h, on est à 150 subs, on va devant la game, je dors à Montréal une autre fois. Il reste combien de temps pour les 150 subs? On est jusqu'à 18h. Sinon, dès 18h, moi, je redescends pour Québec.
Fait que vous avez un counter, là. Il reste 1h50. 1h50 minutes.
Ouais, 45 c'est de la folie quand même.
Non, c'est
Puis on est rendu à 78.